Hi, everybody. Welcome to our Windows Virtual Desktop Masterclass. And for the next half hour, we'll be talking about operating our Windows Virtual Desktop environment at scale. So we've got two speakers for the next 30 minutes. The first one is me, Jim Moyle. I am currently a Windows Virtual Desktop Global Black Belt. And your other presenter is Logan. So Logan, if you want to introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Logan. I'm a program manager on the Windows Virtual Desktop team. Happy to be here.
Thanks, Logan. All right, so let's kick off the session. So we're talking about the ability to scale your Windows Virtual Desktop environment to tens or even hundreds of thousands of users. And the key thing that I need you to remember for this session is that your subscription is your building block. And when you need to scale out, then take that building block of the single subscription and add on multiple subscriptions as you need. Now, we've only got a limited amount of time here, so we're not going to go into a huge amount of depth. But a good rule of thumb is that 1,000 VMs per subscription per region. Now, I actually expect that most people will get more than that. But that is kind of, the minimum rule of thumb that you can work with without actually identifying the constraints in your environment. Speaking of constraints, when you want to look up all the constraints around Azure, around WVD, then I put two links in the slide there for the Azure subscription quotas and constraints, and also a link to the throttling resource manager request. Those are the two best pages to go to for looking at constraints for your environment. But you'll not go far wrong if you keep to that rule of 1,000 VMs per subscription per region, and then use your subscriptions as a building block. All right, so let's go into some of the components of a Windows Virtual Desktop environment. Let's talk about management and a resource group for your management environment. Now, this is things which have a very long life cycle and will always be there. So we're talking about, obviously, your key vault, whatever automation account you're using for scaling, your storage account, and your recovery services. So this is very long life cycle, single instances stuff that should all live in the same resource group and have appropriate permissions applied to them. So this is not a list, an exhaustive list of all the services that you may need to put in there. Absolutely, there is other things that could be present in your environment that you might want to put in there, but use your own judgment as to how to do that. Now then, we'll go away from management of your entire environment to management of a small part of it. And that small part that we're going to talk about is the image. Now, you can create your image however you want. If you're at scale, then I would highly recommend that you automate your image, the build, creation, and configuration of that image. If you wish to use a cloud service to do so, then I would recommend the Azure Image Builder service, which can take an existing gallery image and then customize it to however you wish. Now, Azure Image Builder has three phases. As we talked about, the source phase, where you should be grabbing maybe a Windows 10 multi-session image from the gallery that already has Office 365 installed and configured, taking that, adding in your own applications, your own configuration, and then moving that on to the last phase, which is the distribution phase, and kicking that image out into the shared image gallery. Shared image gallery is super useful because it will take care of the replication of that image around the globe, but also the versioning of that image. So you can pick whatever version of that image you like. You can roll forward, roll back, and do that from anywhere in the globe. You don't have to have both of these together, right? You can pick and choose. You can do a manual build and then use the shared image gallery to replicate. It's important to gradually take these things on board as you're scaling out. How do we configure our host pools? Well, I would recommend a resource group per host pool. And usually we would recommend an availability set. Now, if you're talking at scale, there are limitations to the number of VMs in availability sets. So I would actually advise that you use availability zones. That way you can get more VMs with the same resilience, and that will allow you to scale out much easier. We've got the workspace in there right now, but obviously that can span across multiple host pools. So now we've got host pools, we've got the resilience sorted out. What about storage? Well, the major need for storage is actually for the profiles and the Office 365 disks. And I would advise that you split them out. If you are trying to do WVD at scale, then splitting out the profile and the Office 365 caches is a good idea, because then you're not backing up huge amounts of cache data and trying to replicate it to different locations. Now then, again, another consideration for scale. If you're using Azure files or Azure NetApp files, both have limitations in terms of the number of IPs for Azure NetApp files, the number of concurrent connections to the root of a storage account for Azure files. This is one of the other reasons why 1,000 VMs is about right, because you'll not hit those limitations with 1,000. If you need to spread your FSLogix profiles across multiple file shares, that's absolutely possible, and usually called sort of storage sharding across multiple file shares, essentially splitting across multiple SMB locations. Many people try and do this alphabetically. I would kind of advise against that, given that sort of splitting people up by alphabetical usernames can change both over time and also across cultures. I would much more recommend either an employee number or even the SID of the user, so that you're not culturally dependent on usernames, or even splitting profiles across different file shares by using least loaded. There are community scripts around that can give you the least loaded file share, and then you can connect the user to that file share for their new profile. If you are doing something like that, have in mind that you may need to give your support some appropriate tooling so they can find the profile in the right location. All right. So all of these things that we've talked about can all be controlled via DevOps pipelines. You don't have to, but if you wish to, you can use an Azure DevOps pipeline as a sort of command and control for all of this automation. And you can make sure there are approval gates. You can do all kinds of useful things in terms of testing that things have gone well. You can use Pester with PowerShell to do infrastructure testing and report that back into the DevOps pipeline. Super cool. Again, I want to emphasize, you don't need it to do the automation for the image or for doing an FSLogix least loaded profile. It's just nice to have to tie everything together to make sure that you've got an end-to-end view of your automation in your environment. Speaking of end-to-end view, here are all those little bits of diagrams all put together so that you can have a look at that. I didn't want to put this to start with because you never want to put a diagram with too many icons on up front, but now you've gone through each of these bits individually and you can tell what they do. So that's there for you to take. All right. So that's kind of like how we're scaling the individual components of a Windows Virtual Desktop architecture. At scale, people tend to worry about business continuity and disaster recovery. You should probably think about that when you're not at scale as well, but it does tend to come in a lot when we're at scale. So now then, at this point, we're going to split things up into the personal and the pooled. If you have personal host pools, then that's fine. Particularly for people like developers or something like that, that's all good. For those VMs, use Azure Site Recovery. You can optionally split out and replicate your FSLogix profile disks, but you don't have to when you're in that personal paradigm. Pooled is slightly more interesting. You get a lot of management benefits from pooled, but you have to think about it slightly differently when you're talking about business continuity and disaster recovery. We touched on the shared image gallery before. This will help protect your golden images. Replicate your images using the shared image gallery. Backup and or replicate your FSLogix profile list. Quick tip, if you're using Cloud Cache to replicate your FSLogix profiles, then you need to make sure that you also back up those disks, because replication using Cloud Cache does not mean that you can forget your backup. I said to split up your profile and Office 365 disks into two different disks, right? Again, this is great for BCDR because you do not need to protect those Office 365 disks, reducing your recovery time. The data in those disks is held via Office 365 and can be recreated at any time. No protection needed for those disks. You can also make sure you have cold VMs ready in a secondary location. Because at scale, you'll probably find that even if you have the automation to deploy everything right and back new and fresh in a different location, you may not be able to do that in the required time. So having cold VMs ready and waiting in a secondary location is probably the way you want to go. This depends on how many VMs, in what region, and what your timescales are. So I'd advise you to go and test this and then take the decision whether you need cold VMs ready or whether you're happy with automation just flowing out to recreate your secondary site. And lastly, I love automation. You should love automation. Automate all of the things. All right. It will be investment that you will absolutely find well worthwhile. Now then, that's BCDR. Let's talk about updating host pools. This is an area of active development by the product group. So this advice may change. So bear in mind, if you're watching this later down the line, I would go and look at the documentation and see where we are with this. But today, as of this session, the best advice is to do side-by-side host pools. And this means that when you're updating your image, you create a new host pool and then you swap your users over to the new host pool. This means that you can turn off the old one, but if you need to, you can immediately roll back to that old host pool. There is a way that you can update images in place inside a single host pool by putting the current VMs into drain mode and adding new VMs from the new image and then cutting over that way. It's a little bit more complicated, but it's absolutely possible too. So that's enough about the pools. Management and monitoring. We wouldn't talk about running WVD at scale without touching at least on these 2 points. So for management, obviously there's the portal. I think that for scale customers, we should be looking to move away from the portal into an ARM model. There's a host of PowerShell, and included with the PowerShell, there is REST API for every single aspect of WVD. There are some excellent third parties if you want help with managing WVD at scale. There's the WVD admin, Nerdio, NetApp VDS, and Terraform as well. So you can take your pick from those third parties. All right, now, the very last topic that I want to talk about is monitoring. But luckily for me, I don't have to because we have Logan coming in next with some excellent news, some brand new stuff to show around Azure Monitor. So thank you very much, and I'll hand over to you now, Logan.
Thanks, Jim. Now let's take a look at our new monitoring tools for Windows Virtual Desktop. So Azure Monitor for Windows Virtual Desktop is a dashboard template built on top of Azure Monitor workbooks. You can use it to monitor information across your Windows Virtual Desktop environment, including performance, diagnostics, usage, and so much more. This is a top request we heard from customers, and we had several motivations for going and building this out natively. First, we knew customers needed utilization information to help them make decisions on when to scale. And once they had scaled, they needed health data to manage the larger environment. Customers also wanted resource utilization information to help them effectively manage costs. And customers wanted data and troubleshooting tools to help them find and solve problems in their deployment very quickly. So we took these motivations and we prioritized a set of metrics to go and meet these. And today, our first implementation of Azure Monitor for Windows Virtual Desktop is available to all customers in public preview. When first setting up Azure Monitor for Windows Virtual Desktop, you'll have to configure your environment. This includes installing the Log Analytics agent on all of your hosts in your Windows Virtual Desktop environment, as well as setting up at least one Log Analytics workspace. So when you set up your Log Analytics workspace, you'll need to collect data such as Windows Virtual Desktop diagnostics and a recommended set of performance counters and Windows events And those are what will send to your workbook and populate the dashboard so that you can monitor your environment. Taking a look at the screenshot below, as an admin setting up Azure Monitor for Windows Virtual Desktop for the first time, I would identify the subscription, resource group, and host pool, as well as the time range that I want to monitor across. And since it's my first time, you'll see I'm pointed to our public documentation, as well as our configuration workbook. These two tools will walk me through how to set up the environment, and there's also automation set up in the configuration workbook to ease the process. So our monitoring tools today cover a wide set of needs, and we're continuing to build on top of them and add metrics and features. Today, we can only monitor at the host pool level, but we're conscious of the need to monitor at scale across host pools, resource groups, and subscriptions, and it's something that we're actively working on implementing. Today, we're going to take a look at the overview page, the connection diagnostics page, the user report, and the utilization report in the workbook. And with that, we can get started with the demo. So here we are on the overview page, and this page is supposed to give a summary of the health of your environment at the host pool level today. In green at the top, you'll see it says no severity 0 alerts. This is referring to Azure alerts that you as an admin can set up for your subscription. Since many admins have Azure alerts configured on Windows Virtual Desktop events, we surface any alerts that are active both here and on the alerts report. Right below that, you'll see we've got the summary of the host pool. I can see each session host in the pool, including their status, whether they're allowing new sessions, and I can click on the session host name to view the resource or the row to view the sessions recorded. Scrolling down. In the sections below, I can view top-level metrics from the following 4 pages to help give me a quick idea of the health status of the environment. You'll see for connection success rate, for the connection diagnostics page, I'm looking at the connection success rate. And for the connection performance page, I'm looking at time to connect. And you'll see event log errors for host diagnostics, as well as the median input latency for host performance. Each of these metrics can be investigated further in the corresponding pages. So this is just intended to be the high-level health view, and then I can dig deeper later on. Below that, you'll see monthly active users, daily active users, and more to help you understand the user and usage trends in your environment. So with that, let's head over to the connection diagnostics page. So the connection diagnostics page can help you understand and investigate problems with your connection health. You'll see 2 side-by-side views, both looking at the success rate of establishing or reestablishing a connection. On the left-hand side of the page, this is represented by your percentage of connections. On the right-hand side of the page, this is by users. So these 2 charts work together to help you identify whether a connection issue exists and understand how widespread that issue is across your users. In this example, I noticed that the failed connections on the left chart, or that there are failed connections on the left chart, but no users are failing to connect on the right chart. That's all green. This is telling me that the user or users that were experiencing failed connections were likely able to connect shortly after. A separate note, in an overwhelmingly healthy environment, this would be super green. So the focus on failures toggle at the very top would allow me just to focus on those failures. And here I just wanted to show that you can brush across and see more information. So right below this, I'll see a view of my connection success rate plotted over time. And this helps me understand the bar chart above a little bit better. And here I can verify my suspicion about the failed connections by noting that after experiencing a failed connection, that same user was able to connect about 10 seconds later. So next on this page, I can see potential connectivity issues categorized by the host, user, resource, and client. This section would allow me to drill in and see error details. There aren't any suggested connectivity issues to look into at this time, but I'm going to continue to move down the page and highlight other capabilities. If I wanted to troubleshoot what happened with those failed connections I saw earlier, the connection activity browser allows me to view connection activity per user. I could click on the username, identify the host and session, which populates a series of checkpoints in the connection. So I see the error here is a deployment error, not a service error, meaning that it falls outside of the Windows Virtual Desktop service. And I'll scroll to view the error information. All right, so here it's referring to a connection timeout, which could indicate an issue with network traffic. So lastly, on the connection diagnostics page, I'll see a ranking of errors impacting connection activities across my deployment. These errors are ranked by their number of instances or the number of times they occur, and you can look at the user count as well as the host count to better understand the impact of those errors. Now over to the user report. So the user report has a lot of visuals found elsewhere in Azure Monitor for Windows Virtual Desktop, but the data is drilled down just to a single user. This low-level view can be really helpful when I'm managing a large environment. So let's say a user filed feedback that they were disconnected from their session, and I, as the admin, wanted to investigate what happened. I'll type in their username and select the matching user, and the report will pull up their usage information. Now I can see the status message with details of this user's last connection. If they were currently connected, this bar would be green. Below that, I see the log of their connections over time, their feed refreshes. As a note, feed refreshes are something that usually happen in the background, but they can cause problems if they're not updating correctly. So next, I can view the user's connections and feed refreshes per client and version. These also can cause issues when out of date. And if the user were in a remote app host pool, I would see a breakdown of their remote app usage. Since this is a full desktop host pool, I'm just seeing the total connection time per host for that user. Now we can take a look at that user's time to connect. New sessions are in blue and existing sessions are in orange. We can expect the time for new sessions to connect to take longer than existing sessions. For this user, everything's looking all right so far. I'm going to dig into the details of their connection to take a closer look at what's going on. So now you'll see the connection activity browser, similar to the one we saw in the connection diagnostics page. I'm going to select the host and the session ID I'm interested in. And here I'm seeing another deployment error. So scrolling to see the information. This time the connection was broken, resulting in a disconnect, which I see in the log below. Scrolling down for more information on this, I can see that this error is the user's top error. I see more information that the connection was closed as the client stopped receiving heartbeats from the session host. As an admin, my next step would be to check the session host health. And if everything's healthy and based on the other errors I see for this user, I'd likely assume that this is a network connectivity issue for the user, although I've got other tools like our session diagnostics and session performance page that I could use to go and learn more as well. Now, for one last look at the dashboard, let's take a look at the utilization report. The utilization report helps you understand whether you're efficiently resourced for the number of sessions, users, and the user's workloads that are running in your deployment. This kind of information is really important when you're making scaling decisions, like whether you can add users or if you need to add additional resources like hosts. It can also help you spot usage trends, like when your peak or minimum usage hours are occurring, so that you can adjust your resources according to your workforce's needs. This can also help you minimize your resource costs. To help see usage trends, I extended our time range from 48 hours to 7 days. And on the left-hand side of this page, you'll see the session information. We use the term sessions here to refer to all sessions, both connected and disconnected. On the right-hand side, you'll see users per core. This is the number of users in each virtual machine core. The sessions and the users per core summaries at the very top provide a timestamp of when your maximum and minimum usage occurred in the selected time range in comparison to what the average usage across the time range was. Below that, on the left-hand side, you'll see the number of sessions and the number of idle sessions plotted over time. Sessions item, again, will show the status of all sessions, and idle sessions is only showing your disconnected sessions. So I can see over the 7 days, there's definitely a trend here. On the right-hand side, you'll see max users per core tracked over time, and tracking this value can help you identify whether the environment is consistently running at high, low, or fluctuating numbers of users per core. So it's fluctuating. And knowing both the session count and how many users are active in the environment will help you efficiently resource and scale your environment. Right here, we've got available sessions and the CPU usage chart, which both provide us with more information to help make those decisions. And at the very end of the utilization report, you'll see user trends from the overview page in a little bit more detail. Data points like these help you both understand your user base, your growth, and your environment scale. And with that, that's all we have time for today. So thank you so much. It was awesome to be able to walk you through some of this. As you can see, there are plenty of other pages for you to go and check out on your own. You can use this link to help get set up with Azure Monitor for Windows Virtual Desktop. Whether you are looking to scale or you're already managing a large deployment, this has tons of high-level and low-level information to help you make informed decisions on your Windows Virtual Desktop environment. So check it out. Can't wait to hear your feedback, and we'll continue to improve to meet your needs. Huge thanks from Jim and I. It's been awesome to present for you, and we can't wait to hear your feedback.
Thanks very much, Logan. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.